So we are at the bottom of page 4b, Daf Dalad Amud Bet. Those of you who are following in a regular Big Boys Gemarah, I will share the page now in the Steinsaltz. Okay. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see the page. Yes, good, excellent. Right. Now, you'll remember that after a lengthy ping-pong match of whether we go according to the written word in the Torah or whether we go according to the spoken way it's read in the Torah, we went back and forth, and finally we came to our lovely little symbol here, which means that we've finished with that topic and we're going to start something new. What's of course interesting is that the topic of Yesh Aim La Mikra or Yesh Aim La Masoret, the written or the spoken way of a word, is absolutely nothing to do with the Gemarah that we were, or the Mishnah that we are meant to be discussing. And that, of course, is because the Gemarah goes off at a tangent, and then it goes off at a tangent to a tangent, and before you know where you are, you're miles away from anywhere. But now the GPS has pulled us back to our own topic, but only temporarily, I must tell you. So don't get too excited. We're back right at the beginning where we started. If you remember the very first words of our Mishnah, which I don't know when we started this, but it must be getting on for 6 months, if not more, was Dinei Mamonot Bishlosha. Monetary cases are judged by 3 judges. Those were the words that we started, just to show you where it is here in the beginning of the Gemarah. Let's find it. There we go. There's the Mishnah, the very first Mishnah. You can see Dinei Mamonot Bishlosha. So we have now spent 6 months, and we're on to our 5th page of Gemarah, and we're still talking about the first 3 words of a very long Mishnah. So you can see how, just from that, you can see how detailed this all is, how sophisticated it all is, bearing in mind it was written 1,500 years ago. The Mishnah was written more than that, 1,800 years ago, Gemarah 1,500 years ago, when the vast majority of the population of the world couldn't even read. This is tremendously sophisticated stuff and very, very detailed. Now you can see why it's going to take a very long time for the Mishnah, for the Gemarah, to discuss the whole of this Mishnah, which is a very long Mishnah. And Dinei Mamonot Bishlosha, the first three words we are still talking about, and that's where we are now. Back here, Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught in our Mishnah, Dinei Mamonot Bishlosha. Monetary cases are adjudged by 3 judges. You all knew that. Yes, nod away. You all knew that because we learnt it many times. But here comes the sting in the tail. We're over the page now to 5a. But v'im haya mumche l'rabim, and if, however, there was a judge who would be considered as a mumche l'rabim. Now, a mumche, you all know what a mumche is, don't you? A mumche in modern Hebrew, you'll all know that from when you've been to your GP and they've referred you to a specialist for something. A specialist in Hebrew is called a mumche, an expert, a specialist. So what's a mumche l'rabim? Okay, so what's Rabbim? Anybody know what Rabbim is? What's a Reshut HaRabbim? Any offers? You'll have to unmute yourselves. Unmute yourselves and answer.
Here,
Yes, Nachum.
Here is it.
Hi.
Multitude, a lot. מומחה לרבים.
Yeah, mumche l'rabim.
Many.
Majority.
Rabim, it's many.
Rabim means many, that's right. So it means a widely recognized expert. So an expert who is recognized as being an expert by the Rabim, by many people. In other words, a well-known, accepted expert judge. Now, we're gonna, that's a very subjective statement, but we're going to drill down into that shortly. The Gemarah says, Im haya mumche l'rabim, if there was one judge who was accepted as an expert by the general public, dan afilu yichidi, then he can even judge these monetary cases all on his own. So now we've just completely rubbished the Mishnah, haven't we? We just said the Mishnah says, Dinei mamonot v'shlosha. You need 3 judges for a monetary case. And now we've completely rubbished it and said, no, actually, if he's expert enough, you can manage with 1. So we've got to look into this in some detail because this seems to fly in the face of our Mishnah. So the Gemara goes on. Amar Rav Nachman. So says Rav Nachman. Kagon ana. Very immodestly, he says, somebody like me, dan dinei mamonot v'yichidi. I could judge these cases on my own. V'chein amar Rabbi Chia. And Rabbi Chia said the same thing. Kagon ana. Kagon, for example. Ana, same word as ani. I, dan, can judge. Dinei mamonot, monetary cases. B'yichidi. A yachid is an individual. So I can do that on my own. So these 2 rabbis, Rav Nachman and Rav Chia, both stuck their hand up, as it were, and said, I'm expert enough to do this on my own. So there may have been others, of course. There probably were others. So we have to ask, what was so special about Rav Nachman and Rabbi Chia that they felt that they could do this? Now, I think it's worthwhile at this point just going down the bottom of the page and having a look at what Rav Steinsaltz tells us about these 2 particular personalities, because it's important to know. So Rav Nachman Bar Yaakov, known as Rav Nachman, was a 2nd and 3rd generation Babylonian Amorah. So he's an Amorah, which means he's one of the rabbis of the Gemarah, not of the Mishnah. The rabbis of the Mishnah was called a Tana, or in plural, Tanaim. Amorah, which is the rabbi of the Gemarah, or plural, Amoraim. So he was an Amorah. While he quotes statements in the name of both Rav and Shmuel, his primary teacher was Rabba Bar Avua, Rav's student. Rav Nachman obtained most of his knowledge at the yeshiva in Machoza. While he never formally headed one of the Babylonian academies, many of the sages of the next generation were his students, including the great Amorah Rava. Okay, so this is the next bit that's important. In his youth, Rav Nachman was already recognized as a prodigy. He married Yalta, a member of the Exilarch's family. We'll come back to the Exilarch in a minute, who was a learned and strong-willed woman. Subsequently, Rav Nachman was appointed a judge in the court of the Exilarch in Nahardia. In that capacity, Rav Nachman became an expert in monetary law to the extent that the Gemarah concludes that in matters of monetary law, his opinion is always accepted. While Rav Nachman was known to have a forceful personality, he was also considered one of the pious men of his generation, and the Gemarah cites numerous examples of his acts of kindness. Now, there's a lot of interesting stuff in there that I want to explain to you. First of all, we can see that Rav Nachman here was in Babylonia. He was in Mesopotamia, current-day Iraq, which is where this stuff that we're learning here, this whole Talmud Bavli, that's what we're learning, that's where it was written. You'll be aware that there's another Talmud called Talmud Yerushalmi, which was written in the land of Israel. But the Gemara that we're learning, which is the, if you like, the standard Gemara, is Talmud Bavli. And Rav Nachman was in Bavel. Now, he married Yalta, a member of the Exilarch's family. Now, we need to know what this Exilarch is. Now, the Exilarch is the English translation of the Aramaic words over here on the right-hand side, where my pointer is, Reish Galuta. The Reish Galuta. Reish is the same, from the same word as Rosh. And Galuta, what word can you see in there, in Galuta? Galut. Correct, Stephen. I could lip read you there. Galut, the exile, the diaspora. So the Exilarch is the English name for the head of the Galut, the head of the community. The head of the community in the Galut was known as the Exilarch. Now, he wasn't just appointed by the Jewish community. The Reish Galuta was granted control by the leaders, by the rulers of Babylonia at the time, whether it was the Babylonians themselves, the Persians, the Medes later on, whoever it was who was running the show, they devolved power to the Exilarch, to the Reish Galuta. And the Reish Galuta was given the job of looking after, running, and, in brackets, keeping control of the Jewish community in Bavel. It was a very important position. And as it says over here, in terms of rank in the government, in the kingdom, the Exilarch was at the third tier of government, just under the king's viceroy, with a power equal to the kingdom's other important ministers. So the Reish Galuta was an important guy, and it was an important position. Now, what you need to know about the Reish Galuta is that he was always a direct descendant of David HaMelech. He was from the family of David HaMelech, which is important, as we will come to in the Gemarah shortly. So this is the Reish Galuta. And by the way, I don't have a Siddur on me. If anybody has got a Siddur handy, could you please open it for me? Because I haven't got one in front of me. If you could open your Siddur to Shabbat morning davening, immediately after the brachot of the Haftorah. So you'll remember in Shul, for those of you that haven't been for a while, you have to cast your mind back what happens in Shul on a Shabbos morning. You have the Haftorah, and the person who says the Haftorah finishes his brachot, and then we begin the process of putting the Sefer Torah back. And we begin, as Stephen has just mouthed, with two paragraphs that begin with the words Yakum Purkan Min Shemaya. Now, who's got a Siddur? Beverly, I called you Beverly because it says Beverly on your screen. Leon, have you got a Siddur handy?
Yeah.
Okay, and have you got Yakum Purkan there?
Yes, I have.
Would you please read it in English for us?
Yes.
The first Yakum Purkan, the first paragraph.
Yes. May salvation arise from heaven. Grace, kindness, compassion, long life, abundant sustenance, heavenly assistance, physical health, lofty vision, living and surviving offspring, offspring who will neither interrupt nor cease from words of the Torah. For our masters and sages, the holy fellowships that are in Eretz Yisrael and that are in the diaspora. For the leaders of the Torah assemblages, the leaders of the exiled communities, the leaders of the academies, the judges at the gateways, and all their students, and to all the students of their students, and to everyone who engages in Torah study, may the King of the universe bless them, make their lives fruitful, increase their days and grant length to their years. May he save them and rescue them from every distress and from all serious ailments. May the Master in heaven come to their assistance at every season and time. Now let us respond, Amen.
Okay, thank you, Leon. That was very nicely read, as always. Where were you reading that from, please?
It's the Art Scroll, Siddur.
The Art Scroll, good old Art Scroll. So Art Scroll has done a great job of modernising that prayer. Stephen Fagan, I can see you there. Have you got your Siddur there? Okay, unmute yourself, please. Right. Yep. If you have a look in that Siddur, in your that paragraph of Yom Kippur, which you will know very familiar from being a Shliach Tzibor, you will see the words Reish Galuta in there. About halfway through.
Galuta, yes.
Okay. Okay, so just read us a few words either side of that, so we can just see what the Hebrew says.
But then you've got the second Yom Kippur as well.
Okay, the second one I'm less interested in, because the second one is a prayer for the community. The first one is a prayer for the Reish Galuta. So I'd just like you to say a few of those words.
Gemarah di Israel di Bavel di Bechol Arata Legalvatan.
Yeah.
L'Reish Chale.
Okay, so what we've seen there is with that prayer that we actually do not say in our shul. Actually, nobody ever says it. Nobody ever says it. They just go, but actually, what it says is that first paragraph is a prayer for the well-being and all those lovely brachas that Leon read out, for the well-being of the Reish Galuta, of this specific person who was the head of the community, who was part of the government, as it were, of Bavel. And it also gives a bracha for the head of the academies there. There were very famous academies in Nahardia, in Pumbedita, in Surya, all of these famous academies. Now, what Art Scroll has done very cleverly is it has modernized the translation to mean that we are blessing the leaders of the communities in the exile, in the diaspora, I should say. So although we're actually praying for the welfare of somebody who doesn't exist, actually, those words are futile. It's a futile prayer in the original Aramaic, because we're praying for the heads of the academies. The academies don't exist, and neither do the heads. And we're praying for this Reish Galuta who doesn't exist either. So what Art Scroll has done, I think correctly, is to translate it in a modern way. That means that we're praying for the equivalent sort of people in the diaspora. But
there is also a note actually in the Art Scroll, in the Interlinear. There is a note that actually talks about the Galuta in one of the notes.
What does it say, Michael?
It says the leaders of the exile communities in Babylonia, the Rosh Galuta Exilarch was the leader of the Jewish nation comparable to the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael.
Right, okay, very good. We're coming to that in a sec. So I just wanted to point out to you that this Reish Galuta that we are learning about here is someone who no longer exists, but we still pray for his welfare. So when you're saying that prayer, now that next time you say it, just have a look into the English translation, and you'll understand that we're actually praying for the leaders of the exile. But it's I think very nice, and it's only fair to give credit where it's due, because you know me with Art Scroll. I think Art Scroll has done a very nice job there of bringing it into modernity, even though the Aramaic words are referring to this Reish Galuta. Ravi Do, by the way, deliberately does not say this prayer because he says, I'm not praying for somebody that doesn't exist. It makes no sense at all. I, on the other hand, think it's worth saying this prayer and thinking of it as Art Scroll has done, as a prayer for the leaders of the diaspora, wherever they may be. So there's two different ways of approaching it.
Johnny, can I just interrupt? It also in the New Singers prayer book that they've done, they've got also similar to the one that Leon read out, the same.
How do they refer to the
Also,
leaders?
they've got here Babylon, all lands of dispersion, to the leaders of the assemblies and the leaders of communities in exile, to the heads of academies and to the judges at the gates.
Right.
To all their disciples and their disciples, etc.
Yeah. So what that's referring to there is it's basically saying the Exilarch now is the president of the board of deputies, you know, and the presidents, the leaders of the academies are the big Rosh Hashivas of Ponovitch and Mir and all those places. So anyway, that's a bit of a digression, but I just thought that was an interesting thing to point out to you, since we've all been saying that that prayer, or not saying that prayer, for many, many years, that at least now we know what it refers to. So as Michael pointed out just now, the Exilarch was somebody who was in Babylonia, in the diaspora. And Michael mentioned that he was the equivalent position, which is not quite true actually, but it was a similar position to that of Nasi, which means president, which was the Eretz Yisrael community. Now, that's important, as we will see as we go along in this Gemara. So Rav Nachman was a bit of a superstar. He was also married in to the family of the head honcho. Now, Rabbi Chia, on the other hand, although he was born in Bavel, he actually went to Eretz Yisrael, and he was one of the major scholars in the Eretz Yisrael community of Torah. And if you have a look over here, Rabbi Chia was descended from a family of distinguished lineage that also traced its ancestry back to King David and produced many sages. Rabbi Chia was already considered a Torah luminary when he was still in Babylonia. When he ascended to Eretz Yisrael with his family, some, engaging in hyperbole, said that the Torah was about to be forgotten until he came from Babylonia and re-established it, etc. So here, this is interesting as well. His most significant project was the redaction he did with Rabbi Oshia of an anthology of Braitot to complement the Mishnah. Remember, we had the Mishnah, and then we had the various different Braitot, which were the ones that never quite made it into the Mishnah. He put all those together into an anthology, which some believe is the version of what we call the Tosefta, which is another collection, Tosefta from the word Lohosif, to add on. So the Tosefta is the additional bits of the Mishnah that got left out. And Rabbi Chia is to the Braitot as Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is to the Mishnah. Okay, so that's who we're talking about. So it's important that, why did I go into such detail of that? Apart from the fact that it's interesting to know who we're talking about, it makes sense now. We can understand what the Gemara is telling us when it says that two people said they could, two different people said that they were able to judge these things on their own because they were experts. One is Rav Nachman from Bavel, and one is Rabbi Chia in Eretz Yisrael. So it's important that we understand these parallel societies going on. There's Bavel, there's the diaspora, and there is Eretz Yisrael. I suppose, much as you would say, really one would have to say that Bavel today would be American Jewry, and Eretz Yisrael will be Israeli Jewry. But we can lump in the UK and South Africa as well if we want. But the truth is that the main place in the diaspora is the US. So we have Rav Nachman from Bavel, and we have Rabbi Chia from Eretz Israel, who both claim that they are expert enough and publicly accepted enough. Remember, it's mumche l'rabim. It's not just if I say I'm an expert, it's whether you say I'm an expert. So they are expert enough and accepted as expert enough to override the Mishnah that says we need 3 judges. They are able to judge it on their own. Now, so they made that statement, and now in true Gemarah fashion, we're going to drill down in that statement and see what it is that they actually meant. It says, he translates it here as a dilemma was raised. That's a nice way of translating it. I was always taught, if I will ask you this question. So same thing. They asked the question, Kagon Anna. What's it mean when it says, somebody like me? Does it mean somebody digmirina? Right, what word can you see in the middle of that word?
Dogma. Example.
Yeah. Okay, or Gemarah, which means learning. So somebody like me, digmirina, somebody who's learned the whole Gemarah. I know everything. I'm very, very, I've studied a great deal. Or svirina, or I'm able to extrapolate. To a svira is a logical extrapolation, if you like. So are they? The Gemara is asking: are these rabbis saying that the reason that they're able to do this is because they are very well learned and they are very well able to extrapolate from their learning into every case? Is that the criteria? And there's another criteria, unekitna reshuta, and they have received permission. They've received permission for what? Permission for what? Permission to judge on their own. So in other words, have they got a certificate that says, look, here it is, here's my certificate, I can judge on my own. I've got a Hechsher stempel, I've got a certificate on my wall that says I'm able to judge on my own. So there are 3 different things there. They lumped 2 of them together. Learning and extrapolation is lumped together, and having permission is a secondary thing. So the Gemara is asking, what is it that makes them able to judge on their own? Is it the fact that they have the knowledge and they have the ability to extrapolate? Or do they also need that official permission, that hechsher, that tu'udah that says they are able to judge? Now, who do you think is going to give that tu'udah? Any offers? Who's going to give that tu'udah?
The Exilarch.
Correct. If you are living in Bavel and you want to be a lone judge, or you want to be recognized as having the expertise for a lone judge, and you need permission, that permission can only be granted by the Exilarch, by the Reish Galuta. That was one of his jobs. One of his jobs that was given to him by the ruling kingdom was to establish the Jewish courts, make sure that the Jewish courts ran properly, and basically make sure that they didn't give any aggravation to his bosses in the higher tiers of government. His job was to keep everything nice and quiet and to judge things properly according to how he saw fit in Jewish law. So the only person that could grant a certificate of lone judgeness was the Reish Galuta in Bavel. Similarly, the Nasi in Eretz Israel was the person who would grant such a permission. So this is the question of the Gemara, and it carries on with the question. Let's do the whole question, which is this whole little paragraph here. I'll ask you, somebody like me, does that mean somebody who is learned and can extrapolate and has permission? Or maybe he hasn't got permission, if he doesn't have permission, dinay lo dina, his judgment is not valid. So on the one hand, he's asking, if he hasn't got permission, does his judgment, is his judgment invalidated? Or dilma, that means perhaps, afal gav de lo nagit reshuta, even though he doesn't have permission officially, dinay dina, his ruling is valid. So the question here is basically, do you need permission for your solitary judgment to be valid? Or if you've got enough knowledge and extrapolation powers, can you judge on your own without permission? That's the question. That's the question. Okay. A fair question. No, that's a fair question. Julia, you're itching to say something. Go on. Unmute yourself. I can't hear you.
I wasn't really, other than the fact that it says such as I. And such as I implies that there is no permission required, because such as I, we read the brief histories of these two Ravs, and they were experts and they had powers of deduction. But at that time, when they said such as I, they won't have had permission.
Oh, that's exactly the question of the Gemarah. The Gemarah is asking the question like you are, saying, although you've made an assumption, the Gemarah is not making an assumption. The Gemarah is saying, hang on, yes, we know these people are expert and they can extrapolate, but when they said such as I, did they mean such as I who have the certificate? So that's the question of the Gemarah. What did they mean by such as I? Did it include having permission? Because it turns out, as we'll see, that actually they did have permission. They did have a certificate.
Okay.
But the Gemarah wants to know whether they would be allowed to do it without permission. Okay? So you're actually 1 or 2 steps ahead of the Gemarah there. So let's see what the Gemarah has to say about it. Tashma. Tashma. Come and listen. That's the Gemarah's introduction for, come on, I'll teach you what this is all about. De Mar Zutra, de Berei de Rav Nachman. Mar Zutra, the son of Rav Nachman. So this is the same Rav Nachman, his son. Dan Dina, he gave a judgment, the Ta'ah, and he made a mistake. Ata lekamei de Rav Yosef. So when he realized that he'd made a mistake, he came before Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef presumably was the senior person at that time to whom he could go for advice. Amalei, and he said to him, Rav Yosef said to him, Im kibluch alayu la teshalem, ve'ila zil shalem. So Rav Yosef says to him, what Mar Zutra is asking is, he goes to Rav Yosef and he says, I made a mistake in this judgment. And as a result of that, litigant A has lost money. Let's say he's lost £500. And therefore, I'm asking you, Rav Yosef, that am I, Mar Zutra, responsible for paying the £500 that litigant A has lost as a result of my wrong judgment? Am I guilty of negligence, as it were? And do I have to pay that £500 that he has lost out of my money? Am I responsible for his losses? And Rav Yosef says to him, hang on a minute, I need to understand what the situation was. In kibluch alayhu, if you were acceptable to both litigants, in other words, if both litigants before the case agreed to abide by your decision, and understanding that human beings make mistakes, but nevertheless, they said, you will be the judge, we will abide by your decision, and we accept upon ourselves that sometimes these things happen, that decisions are made wrongly. but we agree to abide by your decision. If that's the case, lo teshalem, you are not liable to pay. Why is that? Because it's as if you have been indemnified, the judge is indemnified by his permission given to him by the government. He is in a position, the litigants themselves have accepted him as their judge, and they would usually only do that from when they've got permission to be the single judge. So if two litigants come to a judge and say, we want you to judge our case, and we agree to abide by your decision, and then he makes a mistake, that is not considered his problem. He doesn't have to pay. Elo, but if not, in other words, if they did not accept from the get-go that you should be the single arbiter of their case, and it was forced upon them, in other words, they did not agree to abide by your decision unconditionally. In that case, if you did not have permission, zil, go, shalem, and pay. Yes, you have to pay up. Shma mina, we learn from here, ki lo nokit reshuta dinei dina. Shma mina. We learn from here that even in a case where one did not receive permission to judge, as the lone judge, his ruling is a valid judgment as long as it was accepted by the litigants. So he didn't need to have the hechsher as long as the litigants accepted it. And shma mina, when it says shma mina, that's the sort of ending, that's a QED. Yes, we accept that is a proof of this case. So at this point, we've learnt from the case of Mar Zutra that if the litigants accept upon themselves unconditional acceptance of the judge's verdict, then even if he doesn't have permission, then his judgment is valid. Now, what you can say is these two litigants would not have accepted him if he wasn't somebody who was learned and could extrapolate. So the Gemarah is therefore able to say, if you can learn and you can extrapolate, and that's accepted l'rabim by the masses, and in this particular case by the two litigants, they're the only ones that matter, then whether you've got permission or not, your judgment is valid. So right now we're at the stage where we're saying that he doesn't need to have official permission as long as he's acceptable by the majority of people and specifically by the litigants. Okay, now we're going to go into this permission bit in a bit more detail. We've got another little symbol here, which is nice because that means we've finished another little topic, although that didn't go on for quite so long as the previous one. So, Amar Rav. Rav says, Hai man de boy le meidan dina. Somebody who wants to give a verdict in a case, ve'ita'a mi boy le mipatra, and if he makes a mistake, ta'a, mi boy le mipatra. What word can you see in the word there, le mipatra? A famous Gemarah word. Patur, correct, Stephen? Patur, which means you are not obligated, you are exempt. So he wants to do a judgment, but he wants to be exempt from having to pay if he mucks it up. Lishkol reshuta mibei reish galuta. He needs to, in that case, he says Rav, he needs to go to the reish galuta and he needs to get permission. He needs to get his hechsher. Right? So if he wants to be exempt from paying if he mucks up, he's got to go and get permission. V'chein amar Shmuel. The same thing. Shmuel says he's got to get permission. Lishkol reshuta mibei reish galuta. And then if he makes a mistake, it's as if he's indemnified by the state almost, and he does not have to compensate the litigants. It's just tough luck on the litigants, I'm afraid. Now, why do you think that we have Rav and Shmuel saying the same thing, exactly the same thing. That wouldn't be normal for us to, normally we have rabbis that say different things. Why is the Gemara telling us that two rabbis say the same thing? Any suggestions? No suggestions? Okay, I'll have to tell you then. Okay, Rav and Shmuel were two rabbis who rarely agreed. Rav and Shmuel often disagreed in the Gemara. Rav will say X, Shmuel will say Y, and then eventually the Gemara will tell us in each case who we go by. The fact that both Rav and Shmuel are saying that is unusual, and that's why the Gemara points it out, that it's unusual, and therefore if both Rav and Shmuel say this, it's almost as if to say there can be no questions about this. There's no doubt. Both Rav and Shmuel say this. It's a bit like saying, you know, lahavdil, Bibi and Yair Lapid both say the same thing. Well, there can't be any discussion about it. So there we are. Rav and Shmuel both say that if you want to get it off your payment, so then you have to go to the Reish Galuta. Now, this is the next bit, which is really interesting. We've still got a few minutes, and this is what I was hoping we'd get to, so it's good that we have. So we spoke before about the position of the Reish Galuta in Bavel. Now, I want to just go into a bit more detail. Michael Kraus mentioned it before, that the Reish Galuta is comparable. The Reish Galuta in Bavel is comparable to the Nasi, the president in Eretz Israel, but not quite, as you will see. Let's have a look in what Rav Steinsaltz helpfully tells us about the Nasi. Initially, the position of the Nasi, the president of the Sanhedrin, was significantly only relative to the proceedings of the Sanhedrin. In other words, initially the Nasi was just the Rosh Sanhedrin, and that was it. It was what we would call today the Av Bet Din. Then, as the Chashmonaim entered a period of decline, while the Chashmonaim were around, you had the Chashmonaim, who were the leaders of the community. They were the kings, all the sons of Matityahu, all that whole Chashmonaim dynasty. It lasted not very long, a couple hundred years. And then as the Hasmonean dynasty entered a period of decline, the position of Nasi became that of leader of the Jewish community, okay, whose authority was not subject to the approval of the Roman authorities or Herod. Okay, so it went from being just the Av Bet Din to being the Av Bet Din and the president of the Board of Deputies. The office's power increased during the Great Revolt. That's the revolt of Bar Kokhba in 135. As the Nasi at that time was Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and he was very much part of the revolt. Now, after the revolt was crushed, then there was nothing left. There was only the Nasi was, in fact, you'd lost your Chashmonaim dynasty, you'd lost Bar Kokhba, all that was left was the Nasi. The Nasi then took on the role, basically, of pseudo-king. He wasn't the king, but he was in the position of pseudo-king. And it says here, after the revolt, when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai renewed the Sanhedrin at Yavne, the position of Nasi was the highest office recognized by the Jewish people, and there was no other independent institution of Jewish leadership. The Nasi was the top dog. Now, this position, which was passed down from father to son in the family of Hillel for about 100 years, took on the trappings of an inherited position of sovereignty, like I said, a pseudo-king. Since the Nasiim of the house of Hillel were also indirectly connected to the house of David, the position carried an aura of royalty. Furthermore, the authority of the Nasiim over the Jews was recognized by the Roman authorities. Now, here's the difference between the Nasi and the Reish Galuta. Although in most cases they were not granted governmental powers. As such, the authority of the Nasi in Eretz Israel was not enforced, but was rather willingly accepted by the people who wanted to live under even a limited Jewish rule. Now, you can see there's a slight difference between the Reish Galuta. The Reish Galuta was appointed, well, I don't know if he was appointed by the government, but he was accepted as a minister of government. He was, in fact, minister for Jewish affairs, I suppose you could say. And he ran the Jewish community with the devolved power of the sovereign. Whereas the Nasi, although the Nasi was recognized by the Roman authorities as the leader of the community, the Nasi did not have any devolved powers from the Romans. Okay, they still had to abide by all the Roman laws, and only the Nasi was the representative of the people in Eretz Yisrael. So you can see there's a slight difference in power of the Nasi to the Reish Galuta, which is going to be important when we come to the next bit of Gemarah. So let's go back to this bit of Gemarah here. Pshita, Pashut. It's simple. It's obvious, right? It's obvious. Mehacha lahacha, umehatam lahatam. From here to here, and from there to there. Now, what on earth is that talking about? Just pretend that you don't have the Steinsaltz to tell you, or Leon doesn't have the art scroll to tell him, and all you have are those words. It says, it's obvious from here to here and from there to there. You won't have a clue what was going on. And that's why we're so grateful to these commentaries, these most recent commentaries that really help us out. You would have to go into Rashi and Tosfos and find out exactly what was talking about. What it's talking about is that mehacha lahacha. Remember, where is this written? It's written in Bavel. So when it says from here to here, it means that somebody who has permission from here, in other words, from the Reish Galuta, he has his hechsher from the Reish Galuta to judge on his own. It's obvious that he can judge on his own in Bavel. Umehatam, and from there, Eretz Yisrael is always described in Talmud Bavli as Hatam, over there. I always felt it was a bit dismissive, really. I don't know whether it's meant to be dismissive, but that's how I always read it, as dismissive. But anyway, mehatam lahatam. And it's obvious, says the Gemara, that if you've got permission from the Nasi, then you can judge in Eretz Yisrael. That's obvious. Umehani mehacha lahatam. But where are we going to find out that, or it's a question, I suppose, what if you have permission from the Reish Galuta in Bavel? Can you then go to Eretz Yisrael, and does that permission hold? It's a bit like me when I came to Israel with my UK medical qualifications, and I came along with my degree and saying, look, I've got a permission from the UK GMC to practice medicine. Did the Israeli Medical Society say, okay, that's good enough, you can practice here? Or did I have to go and get an Israeli qualification? That's the question they're asking here. Mehacha lahatam. Nami mahani dahacha shevet vahatam mechokek. And it's going to tell you that, let's read it in here. It's also obvious, it's obvious that from here to there, the question, they're asking the question in a way as to say it is dismissive, because they're saying, hacha lahatam, from here, from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, it's definitely okay. And it gives us a pasuk in the Torah. It gives us a pasuk which uses the word shevet and the word mechokek. The hacha here is referred to as a shevet, a scepter. The hatam, and over there, it's referred to as mechokek, as a staff. Now, what on earth are we talking about? The Braita is going to tell us. Ketitanya, we've learned in a Braita. There is a pasuk, Lo Yasor Shevet Mi Yehuda, and it's in Bereshit 49:10. David Marks will tell us which Sedra it's in, and in what connection? Where do we read this, David? Are you with us? Unmute yourself. Oh, maybe he's gone.
No, he's here. He's here.
He's here.
It's Yaakov's bracha to Yehuda in Parshas Vayechi.
Very good, as usual, spot on. It is in Parshat Vayechi. Yaakov Avinu is on his deathbed, and he is called round all his children, and he is giving them all their blessings, or not. Some of them aren't such great blessings, to be honest, but he's telling them their future, as it were. And he says about Yehuda, the tribe of Yehuda. He says, where is it? He says, Gur Aryeh Yehuda, Miteref Beni Alita, Kara Ravat Ka'aryeh Uklavi Miyekimenu. This is, by the way, the pasuk that gives us the Lion of Judah. The pasuk says, Judah is a lion cub. From prey, my son, you rose up. He crouched, lay like a lion, and like a great cat, who shall rouse him? And the next verse says, our verse, Lo Yasur Shevet mi Yehuda u'mechokek mi bein raglav. Translated here by Rav Steinsaltz as, the scepter shall not depart from Yehuda, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, ad ki yavo Shiloh velo yikhat amin, until Shiloh arrives. Who's Shiloh? Mashiach. Shiloh, yes, Mashiach. Shiloh is another name for Mashiach. Until Mashiach comes, to him the nations shall assemble. This is the source for the well-known idea that Mashiach ben David will come, and that Lo Yasur Shevet mi Yehuda, the ruling dynasty, will never pass from the tribe of Yehuda. So, in other words, a descendant of David HaMelech will always be king in Israel. And that mentions two ways of putting it. Let's read the pasuk again. Lo Yasur Shevet mi Yehuda, the staff, the scepter will not be removed from Yehuda, u'mechokek, and the staff, meaning the staff of rulership, mi bein raglav, from between his legs. So in other words, there's a scepter and there's a staff of rulership. Now what this Gemara wants to say, rather arrogantly, in my humble opinion, if that's not an oxymoron, what it says, rather arrogantly, is when it says, Lo Yasur Shevet mi Yehuda, when it says the scepter, which is a higher implement than the staff of rulership, when it says the scepter will never be removed from Yehuda, Elu Rashei Galuyot Sheba Bavel, that's referring to the Exilarchs in Bavel. In other words, we are the scepter. Sherodin et Yisrael b'shevet, because we rule the Jews with a scepter. What does it mean by that? It means that they have permission from the government. They were part of that government, the third tier, as we said before. Umachokek bibein raglav, and the staff, which is a less powerful thing, between his legs. Elu b'nei banav shel Hillel. Those are the descendants of Hillel. Shemelamdin Torah barabim. They didn't have any power. Because they weren't appointed by the Romans. They just inverted commas, they taught Torah publicly. They are called the staff. So these people, remember, writing in Bavel, are saying that their power is greater than the power of the rabbis in Eretz Israel. So therefore, they're saying it's obvious that somebody who's got a degree from Bavel, a degree in lone judgeship from Bavel, can go and be a lone judge in Eretz Israel, because our degrees are higher. Somebody who's got a degree from Oxford or Cambridge or Harvard or Yale can go and out-trump somebody who's got a degree from Bognor Regis Polytechnic. Okay, so this is what the people in Bavel are saying. And they say that's obvious. And actually, nobody challenges that. The next piece of the Gemara, which we're not going to do now, which we'll do next week, is asking the question the other way around. What about if you've got permission from the Nasi in Eretz Israel and you bob along to Bavel? Are you able to give a verdict, a sole judgeship in Bavel? Now, that's a fair question compared to what we've just said. If you take on board what we've just said, that Bavel is Oxford and Cambridge and Eretz Israel is on a lower level, can somebody who's got a degree from Bognor Regis Polytechnic go to Oxford and give a lecture? That's the question that we're going to ask next time. So we've done loads today. We have learned all about the Reish Galuta. We've learned all about Yakum Purkon. We've learned what the Nasi did. And we've learned about a little bit about the conflict that existed between Bavel and Eretz Israel. We've also learned that just because the Mishnah said Dinei Mamonot Mishlosha, that monetary cases are judged by 3, that doesn't necessarily mean that monetary cases are judged by 3. So anybody, we'll stop there. Anybody got any questions or comments? Unmute yourself and speak up. Leon, I think you've got your hand up.
Yes, as a matter of interest, how does the population, excuse me, how does the population in Eretz Yisrael at that time compare with the population in Bavel?
You mean in terms of numbers?
In numbers, yes, because Bavel has the superior reputation.
Yeah, I think without a doubt, the numbers and the reputation of Bavel was higher than that of Eretz Yisrael. And often what you had was you found that scholars from Bavel were called over by the scholars in Eretz Yisrael to come and help them out, to come and boost their academies. Hence, Rabbi Chia, who we spoke about before, Rabbi Chia was born in Babylonia. I think wherever he's gone now. He might be at the bottom there. Rabbi Chia was born in Babylonia. Here we are. He was born in Babylonia, and then he went to Eretz Israel to be part of their academies. So without a doubt, Bavel was considered to be the higher authority, both numerically and in terms of learning. Any other questions?
Yeah, Johnny.
Yes, David.
Yeah, that's a good point that Leon just made. And I don't think it was arrogance on behalf of the Babylonian jury. I think it's accepted even today that the level of scholarship in Bavel was considerably higher than in Eretz Yisrael, and that's one of the reasons that the Bavli takes precedence in most cases over Yerushalmi, and Bavli is normally learned first before Yerushalmi. I think there's another point as well, bringing in that particular pasuk, Lo Yasur Shevet Mehuda, that the dynasty, as Steinsaltz pointed out in his notes there, the Resh Galuta could always trace his ancestry back to David HaMelech, whereas there was a big problem during the time of the Chashmonaim. The Chashmonaim were Kohanim, and they were largely criticized because they weren't from Shevet Yehuda. They weren't descended from David HaMelech, and therefore the Babylonian community, the Resh Galuta, could claim much more yichus than the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael.
Okay, I think I'd like to deal with both of those points. The point about arrogance was a bit tongue-in-cheek from me, so I'll accept that. I still think it there, but I think there is very much an arrogance in terms of one institution to the other, and I think if it wasn't arrogance, it was certainly a feeling of superiority. So, but I accept that point that you make. And very interesting what you said there was that the Reish Galuta could always trace himself back to David HaMelech in the paternal line. Okay. Now you'll notice that over here, where it refers to the Eretz Israel people as Mechokeik, the staff, it doesn't say the Nasiim. It says Elu b'nei banav shel Hillel. Now, that's the descendants of Hillel. The descendants of Hillel were the Nasiim for 100 years. And I think it deliberately mentions b'nei banav shel Hillel and not the Nasiim, but specifically the word Nasiim, because Hillel, of course, was a direct descendant of David HaMelech, but only through the maternal line. So again, it's a trump. So by saying Bnei Banav Shel Hillel, the Bavel people are saying, and if you're going to come back to me and answer David Marks's question by saying that Hillel was also a descendant of David HaMelech, I know, but his was only the maternal line and not the paternal line, and therefore it doesn't count as Lo Yasur Shevet MiYehuda. So I think that's a very interesting point that you raised, and I think it explains why it singles out Hillel. Any other questions? Right, in that case, we shall say goodbye. And next week we will find out whether a permission from Eretz Yisrael holds good in Bavel. Does the Hechsher from the London-based Din hold in Manchester? And if not, at what point up the M1 does the Mars bar not become kosher? Okay, that's the question for next week.
Thank you, Johnny.
Okay,
at Nottingham, Johnny.
At Nottingham, yes, at Nottingham.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Americans,
thanks, Dad.
Okay.
Thank you. Cheerio, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Johnny.
you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Jonathan,
Bye.
I got my degree in Bognor Regis Polytechnic. I'm insulted.
I don't even know if there is a Bognor Regis Polytechnic.
No, nor do I.
Thanks, Johnny.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.